Hello YouTube. So I haven't done a video in a while on this channel actually. It's been 4 years since I uploaded the last video. And what happened is, well, real life happened. I got a job. Before that I was out of work, and before that had been at university. But then I got an actual real full-time job, and yeah, stuff happened. And I kind of forgot about this channel for a long time, but recently I've been getting very much into some stuff that I think I want to put on this channel, at least some of it, and that is retro computers for the most part, and kind of as a introduction to this, maybe a bit of a shift in the focus of this channel. I wanted to do a video about my life in gaming. You know, how did I start with gaming? How did I get into computers? And how did I end up where I am today? What do I play today and stuff? But mainly, where did it come from? What did I play back then? What systems did I have? And so on. So we're going to kind of take a little walk back through history. I haven't actually prepared anything for this, and I've already done 3 takes of the intro, and it's still kind of shit, but let's hope as I go through this glass of wine it gets a bit more smooth, or maybe it just becomes gibberish. We'll see, and then I'll have to re-record this tomorrow maybe. But yeah, let's get started. So I was born in 1984, so that means I'm turning 34 in a few days actually, and that also means, even though I'm going to get into some old computers here, I didn't actually have these systems when they were new. I wasn't really a part of, you know, the 8-bit revolution and stuff. I was just barely born while that was going on with Atari and Commodore and all that stuff, Sinclair, primarily over in Britain, and so on. I'll just say that here in Denmark it was primarily Commodore and PCs back then. But like I said, I wasn't actually really a part of that. I was just born around while all that was going on. Just the Commodore 64 has just about come out, and the Amiga was just out in the horizon, and the new Atari ST line and so on was just about to drop fairly quickly after within the first few years after I was born, all that was going to happen. But I wasn't a part of it. In fact, we didn't have a computer at all when I was a small kid. We didn't have a computer. None of my grandparents had a computer. Nobody I really knew in my family had a computer. The closest thing I got to a computer was that my grandmother had my uncle's old electronic chess set. It was a chess computer, but it wasn't, you know, it wasn't a computer game that you loaded up and saw on a screen. It was an actual chessboard that had where each square on the chessboard was pressure sensitive. So as you moved your pawns and all the pieces around, you would push down on the board, and that would register, and then the computer would know, okay, you have made your move. Then it would indicate with the blinking lights on the board what move it wanted to do. Then you had to move its piece for it because they couldn't actually physically move it, and then you could do your turn again. So that was actually the first computer game I ever played, I think, because while it wasn't a computer game as we think about it today, it was a computer I was playing chess against, but in terms of real computers, the first experiences was over at various friends' houses. I remember one kid had a Commodore 64. It must have been. I can't actually remember. It could have been a VIC-20, I guess. I remember it was, the classic breadbox design, and we played a lot of different games. And games wasn't as huge. We loaded them off cassettes and stuff. And games on the VIC-20 was mainly on cartridges, as far as I know, because once BASIC had loaded and everything, you had 4K of memory left for your program, so it was extremely limited. Whereas the 64, you had a lot more memory. So I just remember we loaded off tape and stuff. So it must have been a 64. I was 99% sure of that. That was the first time where I really thought, "Hey, this is awesome." And then various other kids from school, another one had also Commodore 64, maybe a 128, and a few kids had PCs where they could actually with actual games. Mainly back then, we're talking when I was like 5-6 years old. So we're talking 89, 90, 1990. Back then, PCs were mainly stuff that was, in your dad's office, and he did spreadsheets and maybe wrote letters and stuff on that, and that was what you used a PC for. You didn't game on a PC, but one kid had actual games. I remember, there was some flight simulators and maybe some racing games and stuff and remember, I hadn't seen an Amiga or anything like that at this point. I had seen a Commodore 64, maybe 128 running 64 games. That was about it, really. And then when you see, like a 3D flight simulator just running, at least a lot more smoothly than you could on a 64, because obviously there was 3D like games like Elite on the 64, but like actual, more proper 3D that was running at a proper FPS value, not like an FPS of 2, like it was like 20 or 30 or 40 FPS or something. That was mind-blowing at the time. And I specifically remember he had Lemmings on that PC. That was also really cool. But like I said, I didn't have a computer, so that was what I was limited to at the time. Then I switched. I was 7 years old. I switched school. We moved and I had to switch school. And at the new school, they actually had PCs that you just hanging out in the hallway. Really, up and down the hallway along one wall there was computers, and in recess you could go out and sit down on one. And computers also obviously sometimes used in as actual educational tools, but you could go out there. We didn't have internet at the time. 7 years old, we're talking 1991. Actually, it was probably 92, 93. I got to the part of the school where the computers were, because that was for the big children, the little more grown-up children to use, So we're talking 8, 9 years old. And they didn't really have games on. Obviously, they were running Windows for the most part, Windows 3.11. Some just had MS-DOS, and actually, if you wanted to get to the really good games that was on some of these computers, uh, I don't remember specifically what games there were. There was like this travel edu, edutainment game called the Europe game. Well, that's a direct translation from the Danish name Europaspillet. So what the more like international name of that game was, I really don't know if it even existed outside of Denmark. But you had to go through the actual command prompts. You had to stop it from loading Windows or quit to MS-DOS, and then type in the proper commands to get to this game. CD, whatever directory was in, and then start the executable through the command line to get to those games. So that was the first time I really went beyond seeing my friend, type load and press, and then pressing play on tape on the Commodores, or clicking an icon or something. That's the first time I had to learn a little bit about how to navigate DOS, and you really had to just it wasn't something the teachers would teach you or anything. It was like there was this one kid, he knew how to do it, so he told you how to do it, and then you could start to figure it out. So that's where we went on to that. So we're up to 92, 93 maybe at this point. And I'm still more and more fascinated by computers at this point. I'm especially since starting to learn, well, you can actually do things with the command prompt and stuff. It's not just loading a game. It can do or starting a spreadsheet or stuff. You can actually tell it to do specific stuff rather than just loading something predetermined. So I start begging, like nagging and begging, and just pretty much every day I'm telling my dad, can we buy a computer? We want a computer. I need a computer. I will love you forever if I get a computer. Come on, Dad. So it's when I'm 11 years old, so it must have been 1995. It finally happens. My dad tells me we're going for a ride, and turns out he found a used Commodore 128, and it's got all the bells and whistles. It's got dual disk drives, it's got the printer, it's got a ton of disks, like 500 disks with various games and software on it, and a few cartridges and joysticks and everything pretty much you could want from a Commodore system from 128, so pre Amiga at least. It's got everything, and we take it home, and at first we're not sure if it works because we can't figure out how to load anything. And then actually I'm 11 years old. I must have been, let's see, 4th, 5th grade maybe. I'm thinking it's the first year of school where I'm starting to learn English, and as far as there was a few manuals, a few books with it in Danish, but primarily it was all in English, especially the actual user manual for a computer was in English as far as I remember. So somehow, as a kid in 4th or 5th grade or something that's been learning English for 6 months maybe, I figure out how to read enough of this manual to figure out, well, if you want to load something from disk, if you just press load, we figured that out, but that's just for the tape drive. And like 90% of the software that's with this computer is on disks, diskettes, floppy disk, the big 5 point something inch disks. Somehow I figure out, well, you have to do the load brackets or whatever it's called, citation mark, $, citation mark, comma 8, comma 1, and stuff like that. I figured that out somehow. I have no clue how I did that on my own. My dad couldn't figure it out, but he knew basically nothing about computers. I think he got kind of interested. He never really got into it, but he could see I think he could see the appeal that it was to me. What they could do. I think he could see that. That was what eventually convinced him to get it, I think. So yeah, I kept looking over that screen because the preview for the webcam was there, and I just kept staring over it. So now I'm moving over to a screen here, so even if I'm not looking at the camera, at least I'm looking at the right direction. So sorry about that. But yeah, we got this Commodore 128. And it even had an original Commodore monitor, as far as I remember. It might have been a Philips, but I think it was a Commodore. It had everything, and that's when it really took off. I spent so much time in front of that computer, and I even did some of my homework on it. I wrote those word processors and stuff with it, and we had the printer, so I actually wrote some, even though it was like at that point almost 10 years out of date, really. But I used it. I used the shit out of it. I had to share it with. I had 3 sisters. I had to share it with them, although they weren't really that into it as much. Although the oldest of my sisters is 2 years younger than me, so she's 9 at this point. She does want some time of the computer, so I have to share it a little bit. But I spend as much time as possible in front of this. Pretty much, every day when I get home to school, get in front of the computer, sit there until we have dinner in the evening, and then maybe I do my homework after dinner, and then I spend more time in front of the computer until my parents tells me you have to go to bed now. It's 2 hours past your bedtime or something. You have to go to bed now. Come on. And it wasn't like in my room. It was in the living room. Well, we had 2 living rooms at that point. So one was like, we had the computer and there was TV and stuff. And it was, whatever. It was in the living room, so I couldn't like sneak up at night really to. Couldn't sneak in extra time like that, past bedtime or anything. But I got really into it, and I played everything on that. A ton of games. I'm just thinking back. There's so many games. Like, what were the best games for that system? Like Street Rock was really cool. I remember playing that a lot. There was a lot of. I really wanted. I've always been into strategy games, and I tried a lot of those games on that system, but it wasn't really suited for it. It was more like moving sprites fast and stuff, but preferably not something that took up too much memory, even though it's 128, but it was 64 games we were playing primarily. So it wasn't a whole lot of that. Sid Meier's Pirates was probably the game I played the most on that system. Um, uh, but yeah, we had a ton of games, and I played at least all of them. We had like at least a couple hundred games. I played all of them, but a couple of standouts was probably Street Rods, Sid Meier's Pirates. I also think we had the Gunship. Although I'm pretty sure that was on the Commodore 64 version as well. But I might also have played that later on the Amiga. Elite, but I also think I encountered Elite on the Amiga later. There's so many good games, really, But anyways, if I got bored of gaming, or like couldn't find a game I wanted to play, then we had a ton of books. There was programming manuals, reference manuals. You could get these books where there was like 100 games in a book. You just have to type them in yourself. That was kind of a weird concept, really, because you would have to sit and type that in like 1,000 fucking lines, and then press run and hope you didn't make a typo anywhere, because then the game probably wouldn't work. Probably. I did a few of those. Got some blank cassettes so I could save them to the cassette, so I didn't have to type them in again if I wanted to play them again later. But mostly those, really simple, like Space Invader clones and stuff. Some really simple, kind of shitty games. Not that Space Invaders is shitty, but the version in the book was shitty. Yeah. So I had a lot of fun with that. And then, like a few years later, we got the Amiga 500. And now, again, so now we're talking 95. No, that was when we got that. 96, 97 maybe. We got an Amiga 500. Again, that's 10 years out of date at this point. But we got a used Commodore Amiga 500. No upgrades or anything, just the system, a few joysticks, a mouse, and again, maybe 100 games. And then I started playing the Amiga, obsessively, really. I'm 13 years old at this point, and I didn't do as much, in Workbench or programming or anything on that system, to be honest. That was mainly the games, but the games was so much more impressive than they had been on the older Commodore system. And even though the Amiga was so much out of date, we were still running, there was still 16-bit system stuff. The 32-bit systems, like the PlayStation stuff, they were just barely arrived. Nobody had them, really. So it didn't feel that out of date at that point, really. I know, a really pimped out PC could do stuff way beyond that at this point, but really at the price point, even if the Amiga had been, still been something you could buy in stores and stuff, it just felt like you got a lot for your money. The Amiga was just an awesome system for, it felt like it was way ahead of its time, really, because it didn't feel that out of date in the mid-90s. Even the original 500, obviously the 1200 came out in the 90s with the upgraded AGA graphics chipset and stuff, and that pushed it to another level. But even the 500 didn't feel like that out of date, really, compared to your typical PC system or or many of the consoles. There's a few consoles that could do a bit more, but especially with the 1200 upgrades, you could say it kept up quite well with most of the console until we really reached the 32-bit era, with stuff like the PlayStation primarily. So, and yeah, and PCs, well, you would have to spend a lot more money to to get a PC to deliver the kind of graphics and stuff that you would get on an Amiga 1200, or at least. So got the 500. Then, yeah, let me think. Then we are reaching 1998. And a lot of stuff happened around there. First of all, I got a PlayStation. And that was obviously, in terms of graphics, that was leaps and bounds ahead of pretty much anything I've tried before at that point. That was insane. I got the PlayStation, I got Gran Turismo, the original, and the memory card. Luckily, I got the memory card so I could turn off the PlayStation and not have to leave it on 24/7. But I didn't actually get any other games for several months because I bought this new. I bought it for my own allowance, and that pretty much blew the budget for that whole year, almost. But what also happened in '98 was my dad got a PC, a fairly decent PC at the time. It was a Pentium 2, 400 megahertz with a Banshee 3D accelerator of graphics card and a Sound Blaster, some variant of Sound Blaster audio card, and I remember it came with Unreal Tournament. I don't remember the version. It was or maybe not even Tournament. Some Unreal game that was just. I thought the PlayStation had blown me away, but then this PC comes with Unreal, and that just took it to another level at the same time. But obviously, the PC cost like 10 times as much as the PlayStation. So there's obvious reason for why that was. But we also got the internet. So my game library for the PlayStation never got that big. I've played some of the, what I would consider the important games, like the Gran Turismo 1 and 2, Spyro the Dragon, Crash Bandicoot, various FIFA games. Those when FIFA started getting good, and then, well, FIFA hadn't really changed that much. I know the graphics had gotten a lot better, and you can do more tricks and stuff, but it's basically the same game as it was in the year 2000 with better graphics and stuff, in my opinion. And a few other games. But then the PC really started to dominate. But even though the PC started to dominate, I couldn't afford my own PC. And, well, my dad's PC was for the entire family, and now we could suddenly get online and stuff like that. So my sisters and even my dad started also using this a lot more, so I couldn't get a lot of time on it. And the PlayStation was cool, but it was mainly for action-oriented games, and like I said before, I really like strategy games. So what ended up happening was I actually also bought an Amiga 1200, late 1998 or 99 maybe, I bought an Amiga 1200. And well, several reasons. First of all, the Amiga 500 we had, that was also shared, so I had to share that. And also, it started to have a few issues, like the video signal cut out. There was a loose connection or something somewhere, and yeah. So I went for the 1200. And I didn't at the time. Didn't even really know that there was like that was an upgrade or something. I knew it was a different model number, but as just well, it's an Amiga, and it had a bunch of more games than we already had for the 500. Obviously, I could also play the 500 games, but it was also my own, so I could put it in my room. And I played a lot of the first Sid Meier's Civilization again. Sid Meier is a name that if Sid Meier's name is on a piece or a game, then it's probably fucking good. Just know that. Because like I said before, I played Sid Meier's Pirates, and then on the 1200 at least I played Civilization. I played Railroad Tycoon, was another one of his, and I remember playing the original Dune game and maybe even Dune 2, although Dune 2 may have been on the PC, because at that same time I started branching out to a lot of different games, not just what we had in the library. I got the extra, I started buying new games for the PlayStation. I had got a bunch of extra games for the Amiga 1200. Also, we started getting, internet access became a thing, so I started rarely downloading at home because we had like a 56k modem and everything took forever. But in school, they had a proper ISDN dual line connection, 128k speed, and later on they got like a 10 megabit fiber. That was probably fiber optics at the time, because regular phone lines 10 megabit was pipe dream back in the late 90s, or the year 2000 thereabouts. So I started downloading games off the internet, actually fucking totally illegal, but a bunch of games, mainly old games, because the new games was like, they were they were games starting to come out on CDs, and new games would take up a lot of space, take a long time to download, and the way I had of transporting those games from school and back home was on discs, diskettes, 3.5 inch diskettes that could hold, what was it, 1.4 megabytes each. So what you do, you download a game. If it couldn't fit on diskette, you will run it through WinZip at the time, and you could tell WinZip to split it up into segments, and it could actually fit it on disk. So you could tell it, I want to save this on disk. So then then it will say, okay, insert disk 1, and I'll save the stuff to disk 1 and disk 2, and then maybe you had 10 or 15 disks. There you then get home, then you would insert disk 1, and it will load the stuff off that, save it to a hard drive, and then tell you to insert disk 2, and then when it loaded it all, it would then unpack it, and then you could see if you can get the game working. And that wasn't always easy, because like I said, it was a lot of older titles, so we were running Windows 98, maybe second edition at the time, but mostly you had to exit Windows and get into DOS, and sometimes, because we were running Windows, there wasn't it wasn't necessarily preloaded with a driver for the sound card or even the mouse. You had to figure out how to set off, the auto config files for MS-DOS. a bunch of stuff. So I learned a lot about how Windows and DOS and stuff works at that point. Um, so yeah, that's about covers, like the pre-modern times in my gaming life. Because what then happened is in 2000, the year 2000, when I was 16 years old, I got a summer job, like a full-time summer job. I worked 40 hours a week for my whole summer vacation, and I just barely earned enough to buy my own PC, and it was actually legit. I paid taxes, and I think I paid taxes. Anyway, um, I actually bought my own PC. Again, another dressing through my room. So now I have a PlayStation, I have an Amiga 1200, and I have an actual PC in my room at 16 years old in the year 2000. And my room was like seriously 10 square meters. So yeah, it was a bed, there was a desk with my PC on it, then there was a TV with the PlayStation hooked up to it, and the Amiga 1200 actually had its own monitor on a small coffee table at the end of the desk. So that was my life, really, outside of school, at least. And I got a PC. It was an AMD Athlon 600. No, not Athlon. Duron 600 megahertz processor, and had maybe 64 megabytes of RAM at the time, maybe 32, and I think it was some sort of onboard sound, and then a really crappy S3 Diamond 2D 3D card that was really shit. It was really outdated compared to the Woody Banshees. Even the early GeForce cards was out on the market this time, and they couldn't compete at all. It was 5-year-old technology, at least at that point, I think. So even though I had my own PC, I still also used my dad's a lot and stuff, because it had a way better graphics card, and I soon started upgrading my PC. It really didn't take long. More RAM and a proper graphics card, a GeForce 2MX. I remember getting at some point, and then new motherboard, new processor, and then the endless upgrade cycle continued. And I don't actually have any original components in my current system, but I had like bits of the original PC all the way up to like 2007 or something. I still think I had some stuff that had been in my original PC. At least I still use the original monitor, although it's a second screen at that point. 14-inch monitor. Oh yeah. And then I started high school, and we got an actual ADSL connection when I was 17 years old. We're talking 2001. And I started online gaming. Actually started after I had been to my first LAN party, where they played Counter-Strike. Oh yeah. And I teamed up with some random dudes. They were, a man short for the team for the tournament, and I teamed up, and they introduced me to the game, and those, also LAN people playing all sorts of stuff, and they were sharing games. There was FTP servers on every other PC running, the sharing all this stuff, movies and games, music. I didn't do anything but play Counter-Strike that entire weekend. Nothing. And honestly, well, I did play occasionally other games, but it felt like the next 3 years of my life I didn't do anything but play Counter Strike really, and go to school. At school, I failed at school. I started high school. I dropped out of high school twice during this period. Um, Now, it's tempting to play Counter Strike and say, well, I couldn't concentrate at school because I didn't do anything but play Counter Strike. But honestly, the truth is that's an oversimplification. Counter Strike was probably an escape from other stuff going on in my life at that point. I think the main reason I dropped out of school was because socially I wasn't really mature when I started high school, so I never really got any friends and stuff in high school. So that was a really hard time for me. So and Counter Strike was escape, and I started having friends online and stuff well, like most people do these days, really, And I went to lands with them. Some, start playing in a clan, and actually, being really competitive in Counter Strike. Spend a lot of time on that. Also, still playing the occasional Amiga game and other PC games and PlayStation stuff. But Counter Strike was really my focus for several years there, until, well, until something happened. Something that most people that was gaming back then at that time got caught by. And I haven't done my research here. I haven't got any notes or anything, so I just want to look up the release date of this game to make sure. Yeah, we're talking early 2005. Something happened that changed the world of online gaming for millions of people across the globe. And if you've played this game, well, even if you have played this game, you might not know what game I'm talking about, because you might not really be aware that it goes back this far if you've got into it later. It's talking 2005. World of Warcraft dropped. World of Warcraft. I got into the beta even before you could play up to level 10 with a friend, like a couple of weeks before, and played that. And once we had maxed out level 10 in the beta, then the open beta. I'm not even sure it was open. It might have been a closed beta, but then I went out and pre-ordered the game and had it on the launch day. At that time, I had, like I said, I dropped out of high school. I had been to another education. It was called data technician. It was a computer technician kind of thing, but I couldn't get an apprenticeship anywhere. So at this point, I actually started working as a carpenter. My dad was working as a carpenter at this time, and they were really busy, so they needed anybody who were able to swing a hammer and use a saw, if without getting injured too badly, then you could get a job at that point. Because, well, actually, this was before the recession and stuff, so a lot of new houses was being built, and then we at the around New Year's, between 2004 2005, there was a big storm that damaged a lot of building roofs and stuff here in Denmark. So suddenly they had all this on top of their already full order books. So I started working as a carpenter, and really the next 6 months I got up and went to work. Had worked for 8 hours, got home, sat in front of the computer, played World of Warcraft for. Well, I had to eat stuff as well, but 4, 5, 6 hours each night. Got to bed, up to work, home, play Warcraft. World of Warcraft. And yeah, that was my life for 6 months. And that was kind of weird. Because even though I had been obsessed with Counter-Strike before, it wasn't actually anywhere near this level. And I actually deliberately let my subscription expire to stop it. Because it didn't feel right, to be honest. I felt like I was addicted. To be honest, I'd been obsessed with Counter-Strike, and but that's part of my nature. I knew that I'm competitive. I wanted to win, and it was a sport for me, and I wanted to be as good as I could be at that. But World of Warcraft, you're just grinding, and you're just wasting time, really. It felt like to me. But I couldn't stop doing it. It was weird. So, well, it wasn't for 6 months. 3 or 4 months that went on. And then I quit. Or I forced myself to quit by not renewing my subscription. Was weird looking back on it, but what had happened a few months before World of Warcraft got released was my parents got divorced, and it was a weird time in my life. My mom moved out, and everything was chaos. So maybe it was just a way of finding a order in the chaos. Just go to work, play Warcraft, go to work, play World of Warcraft. Simple. Maybe that was it. I don't know. I have played World of Warcraft again later on, but after the first expansion dropped, I went back to it, but I never got that much into it again, like I did with the initial release. But then I started. I said I dropped out of high school twice. Then I started in high school, but it's not really high school. But the education you get is the same as high school, so you can go on to university and stuff. So basically, it's mainly for people that at least a couple of years older than people that are normally in high school. So I'm up to the mid-20s, and we're in 2000, summer of 2005. So I'm 21 at this point. Since I quit World of Warcraft, I've gone back. I tried to go back a little bit to Counter-Strike. That failed. I started my own clan, and then we had a cheater, and then all. We didn't know he cheated, but one of our opponents, after scrutinizing demos, figured out he was definitely cheating, and we could see it as well, and we had to kick him, and then it all fell apart. So I said, screw it. Then there was another game out at this point. I don't know if it was new at that point. Let's see. When did this get released? This guy, there was also a new game dropped. Battlefield 2. I played a little bit of the original, what was it, 1942? I think the original Battlefield. Then Battlefield 2 dropped, and one of the guys I've been playing Counter-Strike with had found some other people who wanted to start a Battlefield 2 clan. And then, well, I said, okay, I don't want to do Counter-Strike anymore. It's getting frustrating. And I don't want to really do anything. I just want to play. So I don't want to, run a clan. I don't want to be responsible for tactics or anything. I just want to aim and shoot. And that's what I got with this new Battlefield 2 clan, because, well, I played a little bit of the original Battlefield, but almost nothing. And they knew, okay, we're getting Counter-Strike player because they can aim. That was their reasoning. We'll tell him where to go and when to go there and stuff, and then he just has to land some headshots. That's what we want him for, and that's. And then I played with them, but it only lasted 2 or 3 months because, like I said, I started this high school substitute education. But I was also had a job at the same time because, basically, my parents had gotten divorced and my dad had to sell the house. And then he told me, well, you're 21 now, you gotta find your own place. And that was fair enough, but I had to get a job. Although we get some, in Denmark, when you are doing an education, you can get some money from the state to help you live. But it's not a lot of money. Once you've paid your rent and stuff, you can just about get food on the table, pay rent, and basically nothing else. With the kind of money you get from the state here in Denmark. So if you want to go out with your friends and have a beer and have fun and buy new computers and stuff like that, you gotta have a job as well. So I was running newspapers in the morning newspapers. I'd actually been doing that a little bit on and off for a few years, or at least a year. But now, well, not while I was a carpenter, but at least not very regularly. But now I was suddenly trying to juggle. I have to spend 2 hours each morning delivering newspapers, and I had to get up at 4 a.m. to collect, so I could collect the newspapers. I had to deliver at 4:30 a.m. Then deliver newspapers for 2 hours to 6:30 a.m. Get home, take a shower, get something to eat, and then be at school at 8 a.m. Then I will be at school from 8 a.m. to somewhere between 2 to 3 p.m. Then I would get home, and then I wouldn't necessarily have to do anything there until I ate dinner at 6 p.m. usually, and then at 7 or 8 p.m. I'll log on online to Battlefield 2 and play some scrims and or actual competitive matches with this Battlefield 2 clan. But that didn't really work, because then we would play until 10, 11, sometimes p.m., sometimes till midnight. Then I had to be up again at 4 a.m. So what ended up happening is I maybe slept 4 hours each night, and then I could get, after I got home from school, from 3 to 6 p.m. when I ate dinner, I could maybe get a couple hours sleep there. And I very quickly realized within a few months of this going on, I as I said, you know what, I have to quit this Battlefield clan, because I don't feel healthy right now. I'm not getting any sleep. I'm feeling miserable, physically, actually. So I had to pull the plug on that, because for the month or two that went on, I would sleep like maybe 4 hours each night, then I could get a couple of hours of sleep after school, but that's still not enough. I really want 7, 8 hours of sleep each night. That's really what would be the norm for me, and it's getting 6 hours, not even 6 hours straight, but split up into two. That didn't work. So what ended up happening was I would feel like shit all week, and then the weekend came, and I would sleep all weekend pretty much. Sleep somewhere between 20 and 30 hours during the weekend. And then we started over. So I quickly realized this is a bad idea. So yeah, then I really stopped doing the whole competitive gaming. From this point on, I didn't bring neither my Amiga 1200 or my PlayStation when I left home. Hadn't really been using it that much for the last few years. I didn't bring them. I kind of hate that I didn't, because then my dad moved and they got lost. But I have since recently acquired some new Commodore computers. No PlayStation, but I do have some Commodore computers again, which you may be seeing some of on this channel. But the next few years, I completed this high school education. I went on to university. Went to university for 6 years, and then and all this time I'm just playing PC games, and I'm not really focused on any one game anymore. I've got a Steam library of many hundreds of games. Let's just check how many. And the screen just went dark because I'm running the Steam Dark theme here, and I got games, 327 games in my Steam library. And now I do have some I haven't played, but I have played at least the half of them. And the ones that I thought was good, I have also actually completed. But I haven't really focused on any one game anymore as much but now we end up back where we started. Like, why am I talking about my life in gaming? And like I just mentioned, I bought some new or some old Commodore computers. I've bought, not everyone, some of them are rare, some of them are expensive, but I've got a VIC 20, I've got several Commodore 64s, I've got a couple of 128s, I've got a Amiga 500, 600, 1200, and a CD32. And what I really want to do is revisit some of the games from my early childhood, a lot of the pre-PlayStation PC part of my life. I want to revisit because and look back at and see, well, I have some very fond memories of some of these games, and I wonder, are they really that good as I remember? Because, or how would I view them with with all I know about computers and games and stuff today? And then I look back at these games. Do they really stand the test of time? Are they worth spending time on today? And we're gonna find out. So that's what you're gonna see in the near future on my channel. I'm gonna be playing some old games on the Commodore 64 and on various Amigas. I have actually got a capture card so I can capture directly from the original hardware. I'll maybe occasionally do that, I think, but a fair share of it might also be done on emulators, just simply because it's a much more convenient. But if we ever dive into like the hardware peripherals and stuff, and then it would probably be a bit more interesting to look at actual hardware rather than what you can do in an emulator or just look at pictures and stuff. So we'll see, but yeah, but it's like my life in gaming is kind of coming full circle now. Also, one system I failed to mention, I got a Nintendo 2DS recently, which is here, and there's and that's not really a nostalgia thing for me. This is because I've never owned a Nintendo system, and there's so many titles on Nintendo system that maybe you can get them both on some old Nintendo system and maybe the 64 and then the Wii and the DS and stuff, but you can't get them on any other systems. Like Pokemon, well, you could do it in emulator, but can't legitimately play it on any other systems than Nintendo systems, you know. Well, there was Stadium or something that they released for something else. I don't know. So that's more of a side note. I do have this. I do have played it a fair bit in the recent months, but that's mainly to brush up on some games that, or some series. Zelda, I'm playing a lot of Zelda, that you just simply can't play anywhere else. You have to have a Nintendo system or run a Nintendo emulator, but this is nice. Put it in your pocket. If you're on a bus, something, you just pull it out and play 20 minutes of Zelda or Mario or whatever. It's nice. But that's, I have no way of capturing this. There's so much you can do to get an output I've seen online, but yeah, you won't be seeing this in the near future. This channel, someday maybe. But that's about it. So you can look forward to some old Commodore 64 games, some Amiga games. I have one in mind that I think I want to go with first, because that might make a nice little let's play playthrough thing. That's Wings by Cinemaware. It's got a story to it, and it's nice and casual. Well, you can die, but the story progresses because you just make a new character and continue on from where you died. So the story progresses throughout. So that's a nice, relaxing game. Although it's not really relaxing. It's about World War One, and you're a pilot, and you shoot other people and bomb stuff and such. It's not really relaxing that way, but it's casual in the way that there's not really a game over as such, as far as I remember. That's one of the games that really blew me away, because that's one of the that it has some 3D elements to it. In the style of Elite Frontier and stuff. So that's quite impressive for its day, and it's Cinemaware with some nice cutscenes. Yeah, if you never heard about Cinemaware, I'm definitely gonna feature a few of their games off of the top of my head. I'm particularly thinking about Wings, like I just said, and Defender of the Crown. It's two of my two games I have very fond memories of. they've made quite a few others that I never really played, but I might get around to. So you can look forward to that, and until I get this going, I'll see. Maybe it'll be another 4 years until I get the first video uploaded. Who knows? But hopefully not. But do remember to subscribe so you get notified when I do get the next video up. And until then, I want to fly safe, because I've been watching Scott Manley recently, but that's no, just take care. We'll see you around. Bye bye.